Hi, my name is Suzanne McConnell. Um, I'm the author of a book, The Still Before Dawn, which is, I can't get that in good position where, it's a book about the cult group called The Move. I understand that I'm speaking to a group in Fairbanks, or to people in Fairbanks, Alaska, and there's a relatively large number of people from the cult that live in your area now. I was taken to live at a farm called Sapa, which was located outside Copper Center, Alaska, which is a bit farther away than Fairbanks. But many of the people that lived at the property where I lived 30 years ago, many of those people are living in your area now, and they the cult is, if you read my book again, The Still Before Dawn, written by Suzanne McConnell. It's available on Amazon.com. If you read the book, it's based on my story. Names have been changed. Some situations have been changed to protect the identity of some of the innocent children that I took their stories and used some stories that were told to me in confidence. And so I had to kind of hide their identity a little bit. Um, the cults, from the outside, when you see them in your town, you see them with their children, and you think, oh, these are good Christian people. Um, and you've welcomed them in Alaska for 40 years now. Um, but they're not good Christian people. They are abusive, and they teach abuse. They teach the parents to abuse the children. They had. I remember hearing the founder, Sam Fife, preaching when I was 10 years old, living at Sapa, Mississippi, and he taught that a 3-day-old baby can learn from a smack on the leg. Don't smack his butt where his diaper is. He won't feel that, but smack his leg because he'll feel that. And a 3-year-old baby needs to learn not to cry at night and disturb his mother for no reason. I remember hearing that when I was 10 years old, and I knew that this man was crazy, but there was nothing I could do about it. Um, from Sapa, Mississippi, my family was taken up to live up in Alaska at Sapa North. Um, Actually, there were incidences that happened in Mississippi, and the farm in Mississippi closed down. My family was moved, and other families were moved. Um, there's a farm near Fairbanks now. There's Whitestone, which is new. I've never been there, but I've heard a lot about it. And then there's another one called Eagles Ridge, I believe, owned by Candy and Mike Crouch. Um, Candy Crouch lived in our home. Candy and Mike both. They were newlyweds. Lived in our house in Sapa, Mississippi. And it's my opinion. She's denied it directly. I contacted her, and she's directly denied it. But it's my memory is that she knew my father was sexually molesting me, and she took me to Dr. Booth, in a little town in Mississippi called Eupora, Mississippi. Um, very shortly after that doctor's visit, we received a phone call in the middle of the night, and our family was moved that night out of the state of Mississippi, and we never did go back to the state of Mississippi. Um, she was 3 months pregnant at the time. By the time she delivered her premature baby in the 7th month of pregnancy, so during those 4 months, she was moved from Mississippi. Her and her husband were moved up to the Sapa North farm. So I've spoken to the sheriff's wife. He was the sheriff at the time, um, and she's confirmed with me that there was an FBI investigation that was going on of the Saba, Mississippi farm, and that when it was dispersed, um, because of all the different problems the community was having with the fact that those investigations were going on. And one of the things she remembers was that the FBI officers told her that whenever they would go out and try to find people that they needed to speak to, those people would just be not available, and nobody had any information to give to them. So as far as I understand it, I spoke with the FBI just a few years ago, and they told me that they understood that the farm had disbanded. But in actuality, what that farm did, the Mississippi farm, where huge, horrendous abuses took place, which you can read about in my book, and there's a lot of people that have stories from Mississippi farm. Um, those people dispersed and they went to a farm in Georgia called the Bowens Mill Christian Center. It was an old town that they bought. They bought the whole town. It had a school and then some houses and places where they settled, and they made basically um, made a community there. There's the New Covenant Farm, which belongs to a man named Buddy Cobb, who is has was one of the founders of the move and is current leader of the move and has been since the death of Sam Fife. Um, and then there's the family farm in the Ridge. These farms all make up this little place called Bowens Mill. Bowens Mill grew out of the people that left from Mississippi. Mississippi crowd, all of them. They piled into cars. They hooked up their trailers. They'd all been living in most of them living in trailer houses. They hooked them all up and they took off and relocated the entire group of people, which was about 300 people. Maybe they didn't all relocate to Bowens Mill, but I would say at least half of them relocated to Bowens Mill. Others, many that were involved in the case, which happened to me, which you can read about in my book if you're interested. Um, Many of those people relocated. They relocated them to Alaska, Sapa North. Um, those people that I believe were aware of what happened in my case. Um, some of them are now living in Georgia. Some of them are living near Fairbanks at Delta Junction, Whitestone, and Eagles Ridge. And Haines, I believe Haines, no, I don't know anybody living at Haines that was involved in the Mississippi case. Um, just Sapa North, Delta Junction, Whitestone, Eagles Ridge, and Bowens Mill Christian Center. Um, there are people there currently that I know were aware of what happened in Mississippi. There are other farms. There was another farm called Ware. It was at Ware, Massachusetts. And I've heard similar stories. I never visited that farm, but I've heard the similar stories to what happened in Mississippi. Um, I have also heard that, let's see, I was in Mississippi farm in the 70s. I was 10 years old, 1974, on the Mississippi farm. Um, I have heard stories similar, not quite as horrendous as Mississippi, but similar with regards to the casting out of devils or making children feel that they're possessed by devils because they behave badly. And I've heard those stories all the way up into the 90s and as late as to this decade. So it's an ongoing problem. It's something they continue to do, continue to perpetuate this idea that children are, as many Christians believe, that mankind is born in sin. Um, as you see, I've changed my religion completely. I'm a Muslim. One of the reasons I became Muslim is was that there's no belief in original sin. There's no belief that I carry the sins of my ancestors, my fathers of Adam and Eve, that those sins are on me when I'm born. Um, but it's an understanding that children are born pure. A newborn baby is born pure. They've just arrived from heaven and they're pure. They're a pure soul before their Lord. They're in complete submission before their Lord. They have a road ahead of them, And that road takes us very far away sometimes from that submission. But we're close to God when we're born, and we don't have a sin in us. We make those sins as we go. um, and we do need mercy from those sins every day. But I also don't believe that a blood sacrifice is necessary for God to forgive His own creation. So, not here to preach or to make anybody believe my position or whatever, but an understanding of what drew me to Islam was the thing that I hated, the thing that the thing that this group teaches, the very specific thing that they teach, that children are evil little beasts. This is something that was in the literature, in the preaching, that a child is born with a beast nature. They're born with the propensity to sin and to be evil, and that without beating and breaking the will of that child um, will never become a good person or become a Christian. He also taught, Sam Fife also taught that children um, children should be given rules and goals which are that they're not possible for that child to fulfill the goal, and then they should be beaten for not reaching the goal. And the reason for doing this is so that the child can realize that without the Savior, without the help of Jesus Christ, that they will never be able to reach to salvation. So he taught that you should break your child's self-esteem, break his spirit, make it impossible that he will believe that he can't succeed. So is it any wonder that so many of the survivors, the people who have left this group, so many of them are addicted to drugs or have fallen into crime or just have no motivation. They have become alcoholics. I know, I have friends who spent their entire life in a bottle because they couldn't face they couldn't face you know what was done to them. Um, I've heard stories. I don't know any, but I've heard of many that have OD'd and died from a drug overdose. From just that's not a direction that I took. My direction was to become a workaholic. I worked so hard. I worked every day. I went to college, and I paid my way through college. And I decided I mean, for me, I thought I was better than the friend who became an alcoholic, but I wasn't. I just became a workaholic, and completely neglected myself, my inner self. Um, I've been on a long spiritual journey for the last 10 years, or 20 years, actually, um, to get to the point where I don't need to be absorbed in work anymore, or in school, or in studies, or um, all those things. And also, I don't do drugs. So, I mean, I don't need to numb myself with anything. Um, but it's a long road, and it's been a hard road. Um, I don't really know what else they want to include with this program, but um, just understand that the abuse that has gone on these properties includes physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. There's been in the recent research for my book, I talked to more than 50 people in varied locations across the country, Canada, Alaska, down the lower 48, um, all different properties, different perpetrators. There were a lot of sexual perpetrators on these properties, and the thing that's always the stable, the what do you call it, the consistent problem is that quite often the girls are teenagers, the men are in their 30s, 40s, and the girls will be asked to leave, or the girls will be um, criticized, and the men will be moved from one property to another but never reported to the authorities. Nothing happens to the men. When I lived at Sapa North, one of the teachers who lived at Edgerton, so this was 30 years ago, one of the teachers was sleeping with his 7th grade student, and everybody considered the 7th grade girl to be the whore. And the man was moved to another farm property, not in Alaska. He was moved out of state. Him and his 7 children and his wife moved out of state to another farm property where he was free to molest other kids, other girls. And he was a teacher. That's just one example that I was, aware of at the time. I know of another example that happened in Alaska also, um, where the family was asked to leave, and the girl was a teenager, and the father was a father also of 7 children. And my understanding is they were also relocated to a farm in the lower 48. Um, I myself was um, molested by a man in his 30s. Besides my father, you should read in my book, my father was also um, a molester, in my opinion, and according to my memory. I have to clarify that because he denies it, of course. Um, but I was also sexually assaulted. I mean, it was, in my opinion at the time, it was consensual, but I was 16 and he was in his 30s. It wasn't consensual. That's not consensual, especially when the girl in my situation was already um, a sexually abused person and abused in so many different ways. I mean, we were physically beaten for, years, and also sexually abused and, emotionally put down. So these girls who might have had relations with some of these older men, it's not that's not consensual. That is rape, and it's more than statutory rape because it's these young ladies have no voice with which to say no. It's different than saying, yeah, I'm interested. Teenagers today might say, yeah, I'm interested in sex, and they may have relations with an older man, and some people in society would say that, well, that should be their business. Um, and as a Muslim, my opinion is if they want to get married, they should be allowed to marry. A teenage girl who knows what she wants and wants to marry somebody older, I think that should be looked at separately, individually. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is teenage girls who have been raised under a hand of oppression and abuse, quite often molested as little girls by older boys, sometimes by men, and so they're easy prey for an older man who knows how to seduce a girl who needs attention. Um, this is a very common problem on these properties. Um, and I have talked to girls that are still in their 20s who have the same stories. So it's not something that happened 30, 40 years ago, and it's not happening anymore. It's still happening. Um, I can't think of any other things to say, and I'm really not sure how long this is supposed to be. We're going on 20 minutes here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off for now. Um, get the book if you really want to hear some of the stories. This book covers the 70s. My story is through the 70s through the early 80s, and uh, from Mississippi, Dallas, Texas, Arkansas, Alaska, and then Bowen's Mill before I finally left. I left, I went to Bowen's Mill, went to nursing school, and left the property when I was 21 years old. When I finally got the courage to leave and to get myself an apartment and try to set out on an adult life, which is a whole story in and of itself on the difficulty that we faced when we leave and try to fit into the world, and especially with no support from family and no friends, none of those things that you're supposed to have in your life. Um, Hard road. And any of the young people leaving today need your help. So Gloria's doing some good work up there, and you should support her. Thank you.